Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming back to the Love and Betrayal channel. Today, I have a new and quite interesting story to share with you. The contract with no exit clause. I didn't believe in fate, only in leverage. And right now, leverage looked like a black leather folder sitting on the mahogany table across from me. The man who slid it toward me had no name, just a cold stare and a voice like stone. This is not a request, he said. It's a contract. You sign or you disappear. I stared at the folder, no emotions, no fear. Just one question. What do you want me to do? He smiled, barely. Marry him. His name was Daniel Cross, CEO of Cross and Vale Enterprises, billionaire, clean record, powerful alliances, untouchable. But apparently, someone wanted him destroyed. He trusts no one. He needs a wife, not a lover, not an assistant, a wife with a perfect story. That's where you come in. I flipped through the folder. New identity, Aria Lane, background, orphan raised overseas, degree in behavioral psychology. Personality, pale, calm, intelligent, emotionally restrained. Goal, infiltrate his life, his trust, and his empire. Deadline, 6 months to marriage. Closet teen, no emotional entanglement, no deviation. And at the bottom, exit clause. Ton. Why me? I asked. Because you're the best at being who they need you to be. He stood up. You've seduced ministers, infiltrated tech firms. This should be easy. Marriage is never easy, I replied. He paused. Then don't make it real, I signed. With a name that wasn't mine, with a heart I'd promised never to use, with hands that didn't even tremble. Because I didn't need to love him, I only needed to ruin him. I met Daniel for the first time 2 weeks later, at a charity gala in Manhattan. He was surrounded by powerful men, elegant women, and enough money in cufflinks to fund a small country. And yet, damn it, I'm sad. He looked alone, not vulnerable, not broken, just observing him like he knew the whole world was a game and he didn't trust anyone to play fair. I slipped in beside him. You look like you're trying not to be seen. He turned slowly, dark eyes, sharp jaw, and the kind of silence that made people explain themselves too quickly. Who are you? Aria Lane, behavioral psychology, Oxford. You're Daniel Cross. Should I be flattered or worried that you know that? Neither. You're predictable. That's how powerful men survive. He smirked. And you're what exactly? Curious. He studied me. And in that moment, I knew he didn't trust me, but he noticed me. That was enough. 3 weeks later, we had coffee, then dinners, a private art auction in Paris, a weekend in Aspen with a group of strategic partners. I played the part flawlessly. Sweet, but not soft. Smart, but not superior. Just enough vulnerability to make him wonder if I was real. And just enough mystery to make him need to know more. 2 months in, he asked me to move in. I hesitated exactly as I was trained to. Isn't that too soon? He looked at me like he could already tell I wasn't what I seemed, but still wanted to believe otherwise. I don't like empty spaces, he said. They echo too much. So I moved in. To his world, his house, his schedule, his rules. I reported everything. What he read, what he drank, what made him flinch, what names made his voice lower. He had secrets. Buried ones, but not the kind they warned me about. Because Daniel Cross was hiding something. Emotional. Something he didn't want even himself to know. One night, he woke up from a nightmare. Breathing hard, shirt soaked. He didn't see me watching. He whispered a name. Evan. Not mine. Not anyone I knew. When I asked the next day, he shut down completely. I don't talk about the past. The woman sent to uncover every crack, felt something shift. Because in that moment, I didn't want to exploit his pain. I wanted to understand it. I was still sending reports, still wearing the wire, still collecting data. But my lines now were starting to blur. 6 months in, he proposed. No grand gesture, just a quiet ring on a quiet night. You already know how broken I am, he said, Bessie. But I want to try anyway. I stared at the diamond. Not because of the sparkle, but because for the first time in years, I wanted to say yes. But I didn't. Not yet, because I had one final report to send. And after that, I had to choose. I always believed that when you got close enough to your target, you could smell the cracks. Desperation, insecurity, secret. They leaked from people like steam from a broken pipe, quiet at first, but impossible to ignore once you knew where to listen. But Daniel Cross, he didn't leak. He was ice, precision, a man who had built walls so high that even sunlight needed permission to get in. And somehow I had gotten through. We were 3 weeks past the proposal. The ring still rested in its velvet box inside his drawer. He hadn't brought it up again. I hadn't brought it up at all. Every night, I lay beside him in silence, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Every morning, I pretended nothing was changing between us. But it was, something fragile was cracking beneath the surface, and I didn't know if it was him or me. My handler wasn't patient. The call came in just after midnight. Aria, you're 3 weeks overdue. I know. The board wants results. He's not as exposed as we thought. He's smarter, harder to corner. Cut the romance, finish the job. We need a collapse before quarter end. I almost laughed. Quarter end. That's what my mission had become, a financial goal. But the joke was on them. Because I had walked into this thinking he was just another greedy billionaire with skeletons in his closet. Instead, I found a man grieving in silence. A man who carried a ghost around his neck like a noose. I discovered Evan Cross by accident. The name slipped out one night in his sleep. I'd leaned in, brushing sweat from his brow, and heard him whisper, I'm sorry, Evan, I wasn't enough. The next morning when I asked, he shut down. I don't talk about the past. But he didn't have to because I already knew how to dig. It took me 4 hours to hack into a private obituary record. Evan Cross. Deceased at 16, caused suicide. Younger brother, only sibling. A student at the prestigious Wellington Academy, same one Daniel had attended. The report was brief, but the pain it hinted at was endless. I searched further. Found articles archived behind paywalls, blog posts from classmates, one line repeated. Everyone loved Evan, but he never felt good enough. And beneath all that, a quote from a school counselor years later. His brother was his shadow in his storm. It didn't name Daniel, but it didn't have to. I started seeing Daniel differently after that. His precision, his control, his detachment. They weren't tools of power. They were armor, designed not to hurt others, but to protect himself. One night, I found him sitting alone in his office, staring out at the skyline. No drink, no music, just silence. Do you ever think about running? I asked, stepping in. He didn't look at me. Every day. What stops you? Obligation, guilt, the need to finish what I started. What did you start? He finally turned. And the look in his eyes, it wasn't cold. It was exhausted. I built this empire to make up for the one I let collapse, to prove I could hold something together. But every night I wonder if I'm still building or just hiding. I wanted to touch him, not to seduce, but to comfort. But I couldn't because I wasn't real. Not to him. Not even to myself. That same week, he took me to a gala. The same one where we'd met 8 months ago. Same venue, same orchestra, same chandeliers. But everything felt different. He held my hand tighter. He smiled more often. And when he introduced me to people, he no longer said, "This is Arya." He said, "This is my fiancé." It hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time, I wanted it to be true. At the end of the night, we returned home, and I found a new envelope on our bed. No return label, just 2 words. "You're late." Inside was a photo, me and Daniel taken through a telephoto lens, at dinner, holding hands. And beneath it, "You've got 1 week to deliver, or we pull the trigger, and he dies not knowing who you really are." My blood ran cold, because it was no longer about collapse or corporate takedowns. They wanted him gone, erased, and me, a memory in the wreckage. I burned the photo, deleted the message, but I knew the clock had started, and I had 7 days to choose: betray the man I was falling for, or become the woman I was never trained to be. And the next morning I said yes, not because the mission required it, not because the handler pressured me, not even because it was the logical next step in my cover. I said yes, because I wanted to, and that scared me more than anything else ever had. Daniel didn't smile when I accepted. He didn't kiss me or celebrate. He just looked at me like he saw every shattered piece of himself reflected in my answer, and finally believed that someone chose to stay. "You don't know what you're saying yes to," he said softly. "Neither do you," I whispered. But we sealed it with silence. No promises, no dramatic speeches, just a quiet understanding between two people who weren't sure if they were building a life or walking into a beautifully lit trap. The wedding was quiet, private, no media, no flashy venue, just a garden at his family estate. 6 people, 2 rings, and a kiss that felt less like a celebration and more like a confession. He didn't ask for a honeymoon, didn't plan a lavish getaway. Instead, he handed me a key the next morning. "This opens my study. Everything in there is yours too now." My breath caught, because I'd already seen what was in that room. The photos, the pain, the past he hadn't shared with anyone else. And now he was offering it to me willingly. Trust in its rawest form. But I had my own secrets too. And mine came in the form of a black envelope slipped under our bedroom door the night we returned from the wedding. No name, no seal, just a card. Congratulations, Mrs. Cross, 6 days left. I crushed it in my hand because they weren't letting go. Not now, not when I had chosen a side they never approved of. Every day after that, I lived two lives. Mrs. Aria Cross, wife, elegant, poised, walking through boardrooms and dinners as the perfect partner, and Aria Lane, the infiltrator, the weapon, the ghost the handler still tried to control through silence and threats. The more Daniel opened up, the more I broke inside, because his pain wasn't theoretical anymore. It was intimate, personal. He told me about the night Evan died, how they had argued hours before, how Daniel had stormed out, slamming the door, and how when he returned, the room was quiet. Too quiet. He never forgave himself. Not for leaving, not for yelling, not for being alive. I never told anyone, he said, lying beside me one night. I'm not even my therapist, because if I say it out loud, it becomes real. You've already said it, I whispered. To me, I should have ended it. Walked away, told the truth, let the storm come. But I couldn't, because I was no longer pretending. I wasn't wearing a mask anymore. I was the wife he didn't expect, but the one he needed. And that made me the most dangerous thing of all. Not a weapon, not a spy, but a woman with something to lose. Day 4 after the wedding, the calls from the handler stopped. No reminders, no threats, just silence, which terrified me more, because silence from them always meant movement. I checked Daniel's calendar. He had a press conference scheduled in 2 days to announce a new medical research partnership, a deal worth billions. And the moment when, if the handler followed the plan, they would trigger the collapse, not just his company, but his life. And now I was the trigger. The final piece of intel I hadn't delivered yet was sitting in my laptop, encrypted, ready to send. It would link Daniel to foreign and backers, expose private conversations, frame the research as fraudulent, and destroy everything he'd spent years building. All they needed was for me to hit send. That night, he found me in the study, staring at a photo of him and Evan. He walked over, wrapped his arms around me from behind. Do you regret it? I turned. Regret what? Marrying me? No, I said. I regret lying to you. His body tensed, but he didn't pull away. What have you lied about? Nothing that matters, I whispered, and everything that does. He kissed me. Not like a husband, not like a man in love, but like someone who knew this might be the last night he could still believe in something. And I let him, because I didn't know how to say I was falling in love with the man I was hired to destroy. I used to believe that love was just another weakness, a glitch in logic, a soft spot in an otherwise perfect plan, until I saw the way Daniel looked at me when I wasn't even trying to be someone else. Until I realized that in all my carefully constructed lies, the only truth that slipped out was the way I started to love him. We were married for 9 days. 9 perfect lies stacked into a beautiful illusion. Mornings with coffee and silence, afternoons tangled in each other's orbit, nights filled with a closeness I never knew how to fake. I learned how he liked his ties folded, how he only ate the corners of his toast, that he always fell asleep 5 minutes into reading but refused to admit it. And he memorized the rhythm of my footsteps, the exact way I sighed when thinking, the way my fingers curled when I lied. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew. He knew I wasn't who I claimed to be. On the 10th day, I received the text. We gave you a deadline. You chose romance. Now we choose for you. No name, no warning, but I felt the chill settle into my bones like a winter I couldn't outrun. I wanted to tell him, to wake Danielle up, look him in the eye and say, I was hired to ruin you, and now I don't know how to live without you. But what would that change? He'd leave, he'd hate me. He'd never believe that somewhere along the deception, I found the only real thing in my life. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning, the one that would launch the biggest deal of his career, the one the organization planned to sabotage. All they needed was for me to walk away that day just before the leak went public so it would look like I knew. So it would look like I was running from guilt. So he would be destroyed from the inside out. That night, Daniel asked me to stay in. He cooked. Yes, the man who hired private chefs had cooked for me. It was pasta, slightly overcooked, but it was the most real meal I'd had in years. We ate on the floor. No music, no pretense. Why now? I asked him. Why show me all this now? He didn't answer for a moment. Then, because I don't know how long I'll have you. I flinched. What do you mean? He met my eyes. You think I don't know you're hiding something? That every time your phone buzzes, you flinch? That some nights you say my name like you're trying to remind yourself it's real? I stared at him, frozen. He continued, I don't know who you were before me, but I know who you are with me, and I'd rather hold on to that than lose everything trying to make you confess. He didn't want an explanation. He just wanted time. He wanted me, whatever version of me that existed now. Later that night, I sat in the dark with my laptop open, the final file still unsent, the trigger that would end his life still waiting on my fingertip. And I couldn't press send because if I did, I'd be killing the only man who ever loved the broken, twisted, lying version of me and still looked at her like she was worth saving. I closed the laptop, took off the wire I'd worn for almost a year, burned the last message I received, and made a choice. If they wanted to end him, they'd have to go through me first. The next morning, I went with him to the conference, stood by his side as the cameras flashed, smiled as the reporters asked about our honeymoon, laughed at the carefully staged questions. I was the perfect wife, until I noticed something strange. A man in the back row, not part of the press, not a camera crew, just watching. No badge. Not the badge. No smile. And he wasn't watching Daniel. He was watching me. I recognized him. One of the silent ones from the handlers team. An enforcer. Which meant they weren't going to leak the story. They were going to do something else. Something final. I squeezed Daniel's hand. We need to leave now. He looked confused. We haven't even started. Please, trust me. That was all it took. He nodded. Told his assistant to reschedule. And we left. Minutes later, as our car pulled away, we saw it. The building behind us exploded. We didn't speak for hours. After the explosion, we drove aimlessly, changing cars twice, switching SIM cards, shutting off everything that could trace us. Daniel didn't ask where I learned how to do that. He didn't ask why I knew which cameras to avoid, which safe house to head toward, or how to disarm a GPS tracker buried under the dashboard. He just watched me, like he finally saw the version of me I'd always hidden. The safe house was quiet, somewhere in Vermont. Log walls, no internet, no signals. Just us in silence. He lit a fire, poured whiskey. Still didn't speak. I waited for the question, the rage, the betrayal, but it never came. Instead, he finally said, They tried to kill me. They tried to kill both of us, I whispered. He turned to me, eyes darker than I'd ever seen. Who are they? I swallowed hard. A group that works in shadows. They infiltrate systems, collect intelligence, target threats before they rise too high. He studied me. And you? I was one of their tools until I couldn't do it anymore. He didn't flinch. So why me? I hesitated, then told the truth. Because someone wanted you broken, professionally, personally, and permanently. Daniel stood, walked to his bag, pulled out an old torn envelope. I've been waiting for this moment, he said, to hear you admit it. I frowned. You knew? I suspected, but there was always something in your eyes that didn't match the lies you told. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a photo. A woman. Red lips, sharp cheekbones, eyes like mine. Too much like mine. I froze. Who is she? Her name was Eliza. She came into my life 5 years ago. Same way you did. Perfect timing, perfect everything. Said all the right things. He paused. And then one day she vanished, took nothing, left no trace. I kept staring at the photo. It wasn't just that we looked alike. It was the way she smiled like she knew she wasn't allowed to stay. She was sent too, I whispered. Daniel nodded. You weren't the first, and maybe not the last. She failed? She disappeared. Maybe she ran. Maybe they erased her. I suddenly couldn't breathe. Because if Eliza had been sent before me, that meant they'd tried to ruin him once already. That meant they wanted him gone so badly, they were willing to send in more than one woman and kill the ones who grew a heart. Daniel poured another drink. So tell me, Arya, do you love me? I looked up, heart in my throat. Yes, there, no hesitation, no mask, no strategy. Just truth, and it shattered the last wall between us. He came closer, knee to knee. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? I let out a slow breath. Because I didn't want you to hate me. I didn't want you to look at me and see just another version of her, another weapon. He lifted my chin. You are the wife I never expected, but the only one I'll ever choose. And just like that, the choice was sealed. We didn't sleep that night. Too many questions, too many ghosts. We planned, mapped every move, tracked every possible leak. Because now we knew. Eliza's disappearance wasn't an error, it was a warning. And next time, They wouldn't send a handler. They'd send a cleaner. At sunrise, he handed me a folder. This is everything I've collected about them, about Eliza, about the others. I opened it. And the first page read, Project, Phoenix Wives, operatives embedded into high-profile targets, goal collapse from emotional core, status active, known subjects, Eliza Stone, Aria Lane. My hands shook. My name was already documented, labeled, tracked. Marquette for removal, ChatGPT said, Toing Alone, KN, UA. Book vào Part 6. My lies started to feel like the truth, Trong Su Pham, married to the man I was hired to destroy. Nơi Aria bắt đầu chơi trò chơi hai mắt để bảo vệ Daniel, đồng thời xâm nhập ngược lại vào tổ chức đã tạo ra cô. Nhưng điều đáng sợ nhất không phải là sự truy sát, mà là cô bắt đầu không phân biệt được đâu là thật, đâu là giả nữa. Part 6. My lies started to feel like the truth. Hung loi nói đôi của tôi bắt đầu giống như sự thật. We were out of time. The moment I saw the folder labeled Project Phoenix Wives, I knew we weren't just running from a failed mission anymore. We were running from a machine that didn't tolerate loose ends, that didn't forgive operatives who fell in love, that didn't leave room for happy endings. And we had become their biggest liability. I had two choices: disappear forever, or go back in, pretend the mission was still alive, gain access, and burn it all from the inside. And as I stared at the woman in the mirror that morning, I made a third choice. I would become what they trained me to be one last time, but this time on my terms. Daniel hated the idea. You're putting yourself back into the fire. I lit the fire, now I finish it. They'll know. They already do, but they still think they control me. Let's use that. I sent the message. A coded update using a sequence they hadn't seen in months. Asset re-engaged, target isolated, prepare for phase collapse, awaiting further directives. 10 minutes later, I received a reply. Proceed with caution, surveillance reinstated, confirmation required. I smiled bitterly. They thought I was crawling back, but I wasn't crawling. I was coming for them with everything I had. That week, I lived two lives. By day, the wife, Daniel's partner, his strategist, his protector. By night, the agent, digging into their databases, feeding them controlled intel, tracking the operatives they sent after us. But something strange began to happen. Each time I looked into Daniel's eyes, each time I kissed him before he left for a meeting, each time he brushed my hair behind my ear and whispered, Be careful. I forgot I was pretending. Or maybe I wasn't pretending anymore. One night, Daniel found me staring at the old photo of Eliza again. Do you think they killed her? I asked quietly. I think she got too close to the truth, and the truth made her disposable. What if that happens to me? He stepped behind me, wrapped his arms around me. Then we burn everything down before they get the chance. But there was something that he hadn't told me. Something I only found out 2 days later when I cracked a deeper level of the Phoenix files. A name hidden in metadata. Someone listed as a founding contributor. Someone with access. Someone close. Daniel Cross. I froze. Opened the log files again. There it was. Initial funding, Cross and Vale. Project oversight, D. Cross, junior consultant. It couldn't be. Not him, not the man who'd looked me in the eye and said, I don't know who you were before me, but I know who you are now. Unless he didn't remember. Or worse, he did. I confronted him that night. No games, no soft approach. Were you involved in Phoenix? He didn't even blink, just looked at me and said, Yes, the world cracked. Just like that. You knew? I whispered. Not at first. I was young. Naive, I helped fund a research initiative through my father's firm. They said it was psychological training for high-risk diplomatic assets. I didn't know they were creating you. But later, when I came into your life, I suspected, especially after Eliza. But when you didn't run, when you stayed, I didn't care. He walked closer. I should have told you, but I was ashamed. Because somewhere in this mess, I helped build the very system that tried to destroy us both. I couldn't breathe. Because every time I thought I'd finally stepped out of the web, I realized I was tangled deeper. But then he knelt in front of me, took my hand. You don't have to forgive me, but let me help end this, please. And in that moment, I knew he wasn't the target anymore. He was the only ally I had left. So I did what I was trained to do. I plotted. I memorized locations. I embedded trackers into their own tech. And then I baited them. Sent one final message. Target exposed, extraction required, phase collapse imminent. The location, a decoy penthouse, the plan, catch them in the act, the goal, finally reveal who was pulling the strings behind the curtain. And as I stood in that empty apartment, watching the camera feed load live to my screen, I realized something terrifying. The woman on the screen wasn't me. It was someone else. Wearing my face, my voice. Operation Phoenix is now active, target trust secured, phase rebirth engaged. And behind her, a handler I hadn't seen in over a year. Welcome back, Agent Lanes. Did you really think you were the only version we perfected? ChatGPT said, Toyliande, can you Chuntabuk Val Part 7. He wasn't the target. I was fan cow trao ngat to trong siêu pham, married to the man I was hired to destroy. Khi Arya Tung Min là người điều khiển kế hoạch, thì cô phát hiện, người bị sang không phải Daniel mà chính là cô. Bạn sao được tháo ra để thay thế cô, nhưng điều kinh hoàng hơn nữa là, bạn sau đó cũng yêu Daniel. Part 7, he wasn't the target. I was không phải anh A là mục tiêu, mà là toy. I stared at the screen, frozen. The woman on it, same posture, same voice, same smirk I wore when I wanted someone to believe me more than I believed myself. She wasn't a lookalike. She was me. Or worse, the version of me they wanted. Perfectly trained, emotionally clean, programmed to love only when instructed, and loyal only to one command, complete the mission. The handler smiled at the camera. Phase and phase rebirth and invented has begun. We no longer need the corrupted version. We've built better. Corrupted. That's what I was now? Not a threat. A defect. I leaned back in the chair, heart racing. I played the game too well, loved too deeply, chose too freely. And in their eyes, that made me disposable. But not before they replaced me. I turned to Daniel, who was standing behind me, his face pale as the screen faded to black. Oh, they cloned your behavior, he said quietly. No, I whispered. They cloned me. The footage jumped again. Another feed. This time from Daniel's private office, back at our real home. And there she was, standing beside his assistant, handing over files. Mr. Cross will arrive shortly, the assistant said. Perfect, the fake me replied. He deserves to see what loyalty really looks like. They were set in the trap, framing me, replacing me, erasing me, in real time. How did they get in? Daniel asked. And they used my biometric data, my old ID signatures. They didn't need to break in, they just walked in, because they made her in my image. I grabbed my laptop, started rerouting systems. Daniel locked down the house from his server, but it was too late. They'd already planted her inside his circle. Every person I had grown to trust in his world, the assistant, the lawyer, the head of security, they had been compromised. And worse, she knew everything I knew. All the secrets I had shared, all the vulnerabilities I had helped Daniel patch. She wasn't guessing her way through the mission. She was following the trail I had carved for her. Why now? Daniel asked. Why replace you now? Because I chose you. And they can't control love. They can't use it without risk. So they removed the risk. I stood up. We're not running anymore. Then what? We take the fight to them. I called in the one favor I had left. A rogue agent, Silas, ex-handler turned whistleblower, the only person who ever walked away from Phoenix and lived to tell the tale. He answered on the first ring. Arya, you're not supposed to be breathing. Neither are you. Why now? They replaced me. Silence. Then, you need to kill her before she thinks she's real. The words chilled me, because she didn't just walk like me or talk like me. She believed she was me. Silas agreed to meet, but only under one condition. Bring the truth, bring evidence, and bring the part of you that hasn't forgotten how to be lethal. That night, Daniel packed a small case, gun, backup phone, passport. But before we left, he turned to me. What if you can't win? Then I make sure she doesn't either. But deep down, I wasn't sure what scared me more, losing the fight, or standing in front of her and realizing maybe I was the fake one all along. Because when your whole life is built on deception and someone copies your lies better than you ever lived your truth, what's left of the real you? ChatGPT said, Tôi liền đây Ken Ioi. Chúng ta tiếp tục với part 9. He knew all along trong siêu phẩm married to the man I was hired to destroy. Nơi Arya và Daniel quay trở lại nơi mọi thứ bắt đầu để xóa sổ dự án Phoenix. Nhưng ở đó, Arya phát hiện ra một điều còn gây sốc hơn. Daniel có thể đã biết về cô từ ngày đầu tiên, và thay vì dừng lại, anh đã âm thầm để mọi thứ diễn ra, vì anh cũng có mục tiêu riêng. Part 9, he knew all along on A Lundbeek A Tudao. The facility was tucked in the woods, hidden behind fences, false names, and 30 years of erased history. But it still stood cold, quiet, waiting. Daniel hadn't said a word since Vermont. Not during the flight, not during the drive, not even when I took his hand and asked, "Are you ready?" He just nodded, but I saw it in his eyes. He'd been here in his mind every day since the day Evan died. We entered through a side door. Silas's intel was solid. Most of the staff were long gone, but the system was still running on silent protocol. Security cameras blinked, motion sensors tracked us quietly, but no one came to stop us. They didn't need to, because they were waiting for us to reach the core. We passed long-forgotten labs, crates of behavioral reports, photos of test subjects pinned to whiteboards. Some were redacted, others weren't. And then I saw mine. 7A Ellen, age 19. Status emotionally responsive, contingency unknown. I touched the file. So much of me reduced to numbers, charts, predictions. So much of what I thought was mine, crafted like a product on a shelf. We reached the server room. Daniel swiped the old ID card, still worked. Inside, a glass cube of machines, blinging green. At the center, a terminal with a single login screen. Silas's drive fit perfectly. The screen lit up. "Welcome, subject 07 AM. Confirm override?" I hovered over the keyboard. One keystroke and I could end everything. Erase Phoenix. Erase her. Erase me. "Wait," Daniel said suddenly. I turned. "What?" "There's something I have to show you first." He pulled a folder from inside his coat. Old yellowed. He opened it and I saw it. A letter from his mother. In the event of subject 07A activation, you must monitor the emotional trajectory, observe love, observe trust, and when collapse becomes possible, make the choice. My hands shook. "You knew?" "Not everything," he whispered. "Not at first, but when I saw you, something clicked. I saw her signature on the file, saw your face in old test records. I realized you weren't just sent to me. You were built for me." Tears stung my eyes. "And you let it happen?" I didn't know how to stop it, and I didn't want to, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. He stepped closer. "I thought maybe if I let it play out, I could choose to love you even if it started as a lie." I wanted to scream, to hit him, to run. But all I could do was whisper, "So none of this was real?" "No," he said, "that's where you're wrong." Because I knew, and I stayed. Silence hung between us, so sharp it hurt to breathe. Then the screen blinked again. "Unauthorized activity detected, shutdown initiated." "They're here," I said. Daniel grabbed the terminal. "We have to wipe it now." I pushed the override. Entered the last code Silas had burned into my mind. "I am not a program." The screen paused, then flickered. Then, rebooting. "What's happening?" Daniel asked. Daniel asked. "I didn't destroy it," I whispered. "I rewrote it." "Into what?" "A choice. Instead of deleting Phoenix, I gave every active subject the chance to walk away. No commands, no handlers, no lies. Just one screen asking, "Do you want to be free?" Because if I couldn't undo what they made me, I could give others what I never had, a chance to choose. Behind us, the alarm blared. Doors unlocking. Security breached. They were coming. The real cleanup team. "Now we have to go," Daniel said. I nodded. But before I left, I turned to the terminal, typed one last command. "Delete 07A Ellen." The screen blinked. Subject removed. And for the first time since I could remember, I wasn't a number anymore. I was just me. ChatGPT said, "Thôi ngày đây, can you ơi, và lần này là một cái kết thật đẹp, thật xứng đáng cho hành trình nghẹt thở và đầy cảm xúc của siêu phẩm Married to the Man I was hired to destroy." Chúng ta khép lại với part 10. I was hired to destroy him, but I ended up saving him. Nơi area không chỉ phá vỡ hệ thống kiểm soát, mà còn giải phóng chính mình, giải phóng những cái người như Cole và cuối cùng được yêu với tư cách là người thật sự của chính mình. Part 10. I was hired to destroy him, but I ended up saving him. Tôi được thuê để hủy DNA, nhưng cuối cùng tôi đã cứu anh. We ran. Through hallways lined with ghosts, through doors that had closed on too many stories, through fire escapes and memories we no longer needed to carry. But we weren't just running away. We were running towards something new. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, the alarms had stopped. No one followed. Maybe because we'd triggered the system into collapse. Maybe because the ones chasing us didn't know who they were anymore either. But we were free. Not safe, not done, but free. We stayed off the grid for weeks. No phones, no names, just the two of us in a cabin that didn't care who we used to be. I slept for the first time without checking for surveillance. Daniel learned how to make pancakes that weren't burned. Well, not completely. And every morning he looked at me like I was still a mystery. But now, one worth discovering without force, without fear. One evening, I found him sitting at the window, watching the sunset, holding a photo. It was of us, the real us, taken the week before the wedding. You could have let them erase me, I said softly. Would have been easier. He didn't turn. Loving you was never supposed to be easy, but it's the only thing that ever felt right. I sat beside him, fingers laced in his, not because I was trying to win him over, not because I was trying to prove anything, just because I could. One morning I walked into town, not in disguise, not with aliases, just me. A woman with no file, no mission. I bought a coffee, sat on a bench, watched the world keep turning without knowing who I was or what I'd survived. It was beautiful and terrifying. When I got back to the cabin, Daniel was waiting, holding a small velvet box. My heart skipped. What are you doing? I laughed nervously. He opened it. No speech, no grand gestures. Just one question. No contracts this time. No missions, just love. Will you marry me again? I smiled. Only if you promise to burn the toast forever. We married again. Not in secret, not in fear, but under the open sky with wildflowers in my hair and not a single lie in our vows. I did not wear white, I wore red. For the fire I survived, for the blood I refused to spill, for the woman I'd finally become. Silas sent one last message before disappearing for good. The system's gone, but not the scars. Remember who you were, but live like you never had to be her again. I kept the message, not as a warning, but as a reminder. These days we live slow. Daniel teaches business classes at a local college. I volunteer at a trauma recovery center. Sometimes I see girls with eyes like mine used to be, too alert, too careful, too tired. I sit with them, I listen, and when they ask who I was before, I say, someone who was built to be controlled, but decided to rewrite her own story. Because I was hired to destroy him. But in the process, I discovered something more dangerous than betrayal, more powerful than programming. I discovered love, the kind they could never manufacture, the kind that saves. And this time, I didn't run, I stayed, and I was free.